taking ownership and never settling. And I really believe that if each of us individually can do that well, if we can all take ownership of our thoughts, actions, behaviors on a daily basis and never settle for less than we're capable of, it'd be a vastly different world we're living in. And so my goal is kind of to unlock more of that for more people.
Man of Mastery, episode 67 with Thane Marcus Ringler. Thane's a former professional golfer, and he shares the number one limiting factor for him as a pro. We talk about this in the episode. It was not mechanical. It wasn't technical. It was mental discipline. So in today's episode, Thane shares habits and mindsets from professional golf that he uses, techniques for discipline. We talk about fulfillment. We talk about mistakes that he learned from golf and the hardest one to fix. He gives us 3 tools to understand and optimize yourself. We talk about using fear to elevate performance, mindset for a practice environment versus game day, training at the threshold of improbable or uncomfortable. And we talk about one of his favorite tools, spoiler alert, for discipline, cold showers. Lastly, we talk about working towards positive change in the world. And that's one of the 2 main reasons I'm really excited for the timing of the release of this episode. Number 1, Thane is now a human performance coach, and he is releasing 2 new training courses this month. The second reason is that this episode airs on Thursday, November 5th, election week here in the U.S. Tonight, as I record this intro, it is election day, Tuesday, November 3rd. The evening of November 3rd, no idea what's going to happen in these elections. There's a lot of stress. There's been a lot of discord. There's been, anxiety. But look, a couple things. I just want to get on the soapbox here for a minute before we dive in. Suck it up. All right, here's a great time to toughen it up because it doesn't matter. The fact is, it does. But tomorrow, we've all got to wake up and do the same thing. Take care of ourselves, take care of our families, take care of business. It starts there. As Thane says in today's episode, ownership of thoughts, behaviors, and actions. Your daily best, never settle. So that's where to start tomorrow. That's where to start tonight. What did I do today? I got up and got an early run in, take some stress out, stay away from the junk. And then tonight I'll probably do more of the same, another workout, get a Murph in, who knows? But that's what this episode today is kind of ultimately about. It's about unity. It's about appreciating differences. They make us stronger. It's about finding that mutual respect that whoever comes out as the next president in the U.S., sure, it has huge implications. Sure, it affects each of us personally in some way. But ultimately, it is what it is. And we've got to take care of business each day ourselves to the best of our ability. And we've got to come back together somehow as a country and as a world. All right, so that being said, 3 quick calls to action before we dive in. Number 1, I would just like to thank you again for listening, and I'd like to ask that you share this episode in particular, the podcast in general, with at least one other person. I had the honor of speaking to a gentleman today who we just had our worlds collide. So he found the podcast, and it turns out we are teammates in another program, both, right? So what seems like a small world these days through technology, and I suppose the cliche is that it is, but there's still such a vast amount of information out there. That reminded me this is an opportunity to tell somebody else that may not have found something that you find valuable. And if you do, odds are the people around you have similar challenges, similar tastes, and could use similar information. So number 1, please, Man of Mastery, spread the love. 2, check out Thane Marcus Ringler. You're going to find links to all of his courses and material in the show notes for this episode, manofmastery.com/067. And 3, listen to the end. In addition to all the other tools and tips that I mentioned Thane is going to give us, at the very end, he's got a great takeaway for an action you need to take today. So I guess you could fast forward to the end. There it is. It's at the end. But listen through. This is a great conversation with Thane Marcus Ringler. All right, Thane Marcus Ringler. He's a former professional golfer, speaker, author, a new book coming out, host of another podcast himself, the Up and Comer Show about intentional living. Thane, welcome. I'm excited to talk today.
Thanks for having me on, Michael. It's great to connect here virtually at least, and hopefully at some point in the future, not so virtual.
Virtually. Yeah, I would love that. This is the world we're in right now. So new book, has it come out yet or it's on its way out? Catalysts for Hope, Unlocking Energy, Optimism, and Your Full Potential.
It is out and available on my website right now. So I wanted to kind of offer it first on my website just to get it in people's hands for free. Just drop it in an email and you get a copy, an e-copy of it. And really, I think this time of our lives in the world and America where we find ourselves in, it's a place where I think more and more people are feeling hopeless. And so the goal of this book is really that we can be hopeful, filled with hope, that's always readily available wherever we're at. And it's just sharing some perspectives that I've found in my journey so far that have been really helpful in finding hope, even in hopeless seeming times.
That's a great mission. Appreciate that it's offered for free right now. Certainly something support that I think a lot of us could use. So I was reading some of your mission around more broadly, just looking to help others live and work better. Tell me more about that.
It's been a journey, man. I like all of us. We all are on crazy journeys in life that are meandering, kind of weaving paths that we never expected. I never planned on writing, speaking, anything. And coming out, I played golf professionally for about 3 or 4 years. And through that journey and through the lifelong pursuit of golf, it instilled in me a lot of disciplines and habits that have benefited me so much as a person and as a man. And a lot of my work now just centers on taking those mindsets, habits, disciplines of a professional athlete into people in their work and in their lives. And as I've done that over the last 3 years, it's really solidified into this kind of rally cry of taking ownership and never settling. And I really believe that if each of us individually can do that well, if we can all take ownership of our thoughts, actions, behaviors on a daily basis, and never settle for less than we're capable of, it'd be a vastly different world we're living in. And so my goal is kind of to unlock more of that for more people. And it's catered focused mainly on the people that are in the middle tier of society or the world, the people that have their survival needs taken care of, but aren't necessarily doing anything with that. And so I really am passionate about that people group.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. In this country, many of us are fortunate to be somewhere up Maslow's hierarchy. And we've
Mm-hmm.
got shelter and survival taken care of. But so many people kind of go like, I'm not fulfilled. I did this, or I achieved, or I got, or I bought, or whatever it is, but haven't reached really what is this all about?
Totally. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And it is a process. It's not like an overnight thing, right? It's true for you and me and for all of us that we're still figuring that out every single day and we're still pursuing that and it doesn't stop. But there's hope in that because then we realize that back to the hope piece that it's not about a destination. We don't have to wait to be fulfilled at a arrival point that is in the future and realizing that the arrival point won't bring the fulfillment you think it will, but the process of getting there always has the potential to do that. And so when we reframe our perspective on that, then we see every day is an awesome opportunity to take the next step. And by taking the next step every single day, we can walk a long ways, one step, one day at a time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well said. I know we were talking a little bit off air about some of the mindset training that I've done and that I coach. And there's a saying that these guys have, and this kind of relates back to hope and maybe the situation we're in and unknowns and what life throws at you is you can only control four things: intention, attention, your emotions, and your physiology.
Mm.
Right. So it kind of comes back to looking after yourself and getting yourself right, and the rest of it is just kind of the chaos that's the fun of life. But if
Hmm.
you look at it that way, okay, I'm going to focus on what I can control, be the best version of me I can be. That's the mindset piece. And then the rest is just the journey, the process, like you said.
It's so beautiful. I love that. Intention, attention, emotion, and physiology. I wrote those down because I'm gonna dwell on that some more because that's really good. And I think what's fun about that too is that when we think about what does that entail, right? You just said that life is chaotic and it has a lot of elements that we have no control over. And the first step is always recognizing what we need to take ownership of, right? We don't need to take ownership of the direction of our country or global affairs or even like the state of our city. That's impossible for us to take ownership of. What we can take ownership of is ourselves first, and then our individual impact from that. And really at the core of that is, I believe, self-awareness, right? We have to be able to be aware enough of what we aren't taking ownership of in order to start taking ownership of it, and even what we can't really or shouldn't take ownership of in that sense. And so that's why I'm a big believer in growing self-awareness among us. And the quote is by Chris Schwartz, who said, if you can't self-observe, you can't self-correct. And so if we want to steer ourselves well, we have to see ourselves well first. And so that's been a big part of the focus, at least this last year, especially.
Awesome. Where do you help people start, or what do you advise on becoming more self-aware? Where does that start?
Yeah, I really think it begins with an understanding of the general process. Meaning, I think it's a really simple and intuitive, and everyone can relate to this process of understanding self awareness and growing in it. Is going through this process of past, present, future, and I like to say retroactively, actively, and then proactively. And even more specific, I could say discovering, understanding, and then optimizing. And so through this process, it's just then while you're walking through that, you use different tools to help you in that process. And the three primary tools that I really think can be super beneficial in this are reflection and journaling, something simple of just sitting down, pen and paper, and yourself. That's the cheapest form of self care and self awareness work you can ever have, right? It's creating the space and time to look back at the past, understand what happened and why, what led to what happened within you when those events were transpiring, and what it meant for you. And then the other two primary tools are feedback. So having objectivity from other people, meaning, hey, you are inherently subjective as an individual human being. We are all inherently subjective. So in order to gain some objectivity, having another person's feedback will help you do that. And finally, the other third primary tool is meditation, is creating the discipline, the mental muscle and habit of space in your mind for you to be present. And that allows you to better recognize how we operate in the moments and what we're feeling and how our emotions play and impact our daily interactions and decisions. So by understanding the three primary tools and then understanding the process, we can start putting the pieces together of moving forward in self-awareness.
It is amazing how few people have separated from some of the function that just seems to be on autopilot
Hmm.
in our bodies. Like I know I want to get into sports and discipline through that you've experienced through the sport of golf. But as a quick example, my son, he's 12. He plays. We run Spartan races together, and he plays club soccer. So I took him and a few other boys out, and I'm taking them out and doing some extra mindset training within integrated with physical training. But every time we train, we start with a breathing exercise. And the first time I got some of these kids out there, I ask them like, "Hey, does anybody here know how to breathe? Or is anybody here not breathing right now?" Right? And
Yeah.
it's cheesy, but the point is that it's one of those things that's kind of happening automatically, but not many people focus on maybe different ways to breathe or different breathing tools and what it means mentally and physiologically. And I would say the same with something like our thoughts.
Mm,
Getting awareness of sometimes our thoughts are running away and they're running us, but creating that separation that we're not our thoughts. We are more than just our thoughts, and we can control and redirect those thoughts in a way that's more positive, more helpful, more of a
mm.
tool than being a tool to them.
Yeah, I think what you just brought up is a really important point too, to just underscore a little more, and the fact that there is an unhealthy version of self awareness. The dark side or the far side, as I like to say, is this form of hyper awareness, to where we are so aware of our thoughts and so stuck in our minds that we can't do anything about it or externally, right? It leads to inaction instead of action. There's a great book titled Strangers to Ourselves by Timothy Wilson. He's a professor and I believe a psychologist, but in it, he really breaks down, and the whole book is about self-awareness and the amount of things that our subconscious runs within our lives and bodies, which is 95% plus, right? And the deeper you dive into that rabbit hole, the more and more depressing it can be, because it feels like we don't have any control, right? And we're like, I am so led by my subconscious that my conscious has no play in this. And that can become depressing and defeating. And so his whole point is like, look, self-awareness is only as helpful as you acting like the person that you want to be ultimately. And so he just brings up a good caveat that if we start becoming hyper aware, that leads to us being debilitated from taking action, that's not helpful or healthy. And that's the dark side. So that's kind of a cautionary tale of what is beyond self-awareness.
I can relate to that. Just thinking from a from a business world, a saying that you hear a lot is analysis paralysis.
Hmm.
At some point, it's like you gotta act. You gotta put one
Yeah.
foot in front of the other. Question about, so I think one of the titles you give yourself is development coach. So of those, the points you mentioned, feedback,
Hmm.
feedback and helping create awareness, is that best done through a coach? Is that the connection?
It's a primary means of it. By no means is it the only means of it, though. I got into coaching because coming out of golf, my brother-in-law was an executive coach at the time. So I learned a bit about the space from him. And as I thought about what the experience had given me and what value I could provide to others, I, I thought that this could be an interesting practice to come alongside others and give them a lot of the framework and structure that I had done for myself. So I started with a handful of friends and just tested it out for about half a year to prove the concept, and then turned it into a practice and a business. And so a lot of development coaching, or coaching in general, is what you just said, is helping provide objectivity through holding up a mirror of questions and prodding and prying to get to the root of what's going on or what's holding us back. Um, and really, that involves living with integrity, which means living as a person you say you are or that you want to be. And we each daily have feedback on that reality, right? So by the role of a coach is really just to expose whether we are living with integrity or not, and then helping coach or provide direction within that process of living with better integrity. And development is really, it can entail a lot of different things, but it's typically catered to three types of people that are stuck and want to get unstuck within their professional and personal life, people that are in a transition, starting like a side hustle or changing careers and need more assistance in creating the structure to be successful within that, or finally people that want to level up within their work and are just feeling like they need some extra coaching, teammates, help, and strategy to get to the next level. So those are the three types of people I found myself working with the most. And it is a really helpful tool for awareness. And that's a lot of where my focus on self-awareness comes from.
I'm curious if you found, I think about sort of the midlife executives, career success, financial success, maybe from the outside it looks like everything is humming. And oftentimes, in a way, I think they are both stuck and needing or wanting to level up, but may not yet fully admit that to themselves. So, you might hear things like, well, I've kind of gotten out of balance. I'm out of shape. I'd love to get back in shape. Or maybe work has overtaken time with family. But, maybe they haven't fully come to the realization of I need or want to make a change. Or it sort of feels like, I'm at the top of the mountain, but I can't actually see it's a false summit. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't engaged somebody to bring some new awareness to perspective. And when it comes to something like a coach, I've found so many guys that have felt self-made, felt independent in their
Mm-hmm.
success, that kind of go, why would I need somebody else? But at the same time, a lot of these high performers have some kind of a competitive or sports background in their life. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What did that feel like when you were a top athlete? Did you do it on your own? Did you do it without a team, without a coach, without a framework, without a system,
Mm-hmm.
without, challenges and crucibles that help you ratchet up? No. right? And so I've had a hard time with, I get sort of the empathy of meet people where they are, but at the same time, it's like, come on, guy, like a little bit of a wake up call. So,
Mhm.
do you see some of that?
Yeah, totally. I think your analogy is really fitting, in the sense that even as a professional golfer, I had a fitness coach, I had a swing coach, and if I was at a higher tier in the rankings, I would have had even more people than just that. And that was on the middle to lower tiers of professional golf, and I still had two coaches. So I think it's a very fitting analogy. And the reality is, we are limited in our capacity as human beings. We are individuals, right? And so by saying that we're self-made, one, that's dishonest. It's intellectually right. Every single person is not self-made. There's no self-made person in the world. We all are given our birthplace of origin. We never had anything to do with who we were born, what family we were born into, where we were born, the time we were born. All those things are just completely out of our hands. So that's not self-made. And then, we can't do anything in life on our own. We are products of the people that are surrounding us, supporting us in those journeys, our parents, mentors, people that support, teachers, people that impact and develop our lives. So I think we just have to recognize that. And it helps free us up too, because this bootstrap myth of that you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, it actually really hurts us, like you said, because it's this macho man mentality that we think is what being a good man entails, and that's what is desired by all. But really, it makes us our own god. It makes us the center of the universe, and it makes us think that we are capable without the help of another. And it limits ourselves, because if you think about the greatest performers or teams or anything, right? They are made so much better by the people that are supporting them and adding and influencing them. Meaning, you look at any of the top tier athletes today, any of the top tier performers, singers, you name it, like businessmen, right? They're all being supported by a group of people that are enabling that marquee performance. And so, similarly, in our lives, if we want to start adding elements of that, investing in those resources is a really helpful way to do it. And to speak one last thing to what you had mentioned earlier, um, it's easy to think about these things and recognize them. It's a lot harder to take action. And there's a great quote by Millard Fuller. He said, "It's a lot easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting." And I think that's just a beautiful way of saying, look, I don't believe you until you start taking action. I just don't. This is really cheap right now. What you and I are doing, we're talking. You start making actions, taking steps, then I'll start believing you more. And I think that's important to understand for all of us, myself included.
So I'm just going to take a quick left turn here. Is that your way, Thane, of saying that you may not go out and plunk money down to sign up for a Crucible event with me in March, but you might start training now in case you're able to do it in March?
That would be rad. I need
That's
to
what I'm hearing.
consider that.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
need to
hearing.
consider that for sure.
All right,
No, and
we'll trade some training plans offline.
yes.
I like the
So
word you
good.
use though, investing, because it really is. It's an investment, and again, like if you're financially successful, you're doing a lot of different types of investing. Why not invest in yourself
Mm.
first and foremost? And it does pay off. It pays off everywhere. It pays off in your relationships, in your career, how you show up in every element of your life. And I would also say, you mentioned the team, whether it's something that seems like a one athlete sport like golf, or maybe you have your caddy, but there's always a team. And for anybody who's had, again, we use the metaphor of sports, or it could be a musician in an orchestra or a band or whatever it is, the bond that you create with your team through succeeding together, and again, success is a process. So
Mm.
usually there's lots of failures and hard stuff that goes along the way. Doing that hard stuff and growing together creates relationships and bonds like nothing else.
It's so true. It made me think of recently. I don't know if you've seen the show Alone. Um, it's basically a better form of Survivor, in the sense that I think there's like 10
Mm,
people that go out into like the Alaskan wilderness or the
right.
Canadian tundra, and whoever can last the longest wins. They have like 10 things to survive with. But it's so fascinating when you watch that show and those people's experience, because the number one problem I think that they all face, that's the hardest, is the lack of other people, right? The fact of them being alone. I mean, they have the biggest emotional breakdowns by just the fact that they're by themselves for that long. They aren't sharing any experiences. I mean, they have the camera, but that's not the same, right? You're not sharing those experiences. And that's a hyper extreme example of what this Lone Ranger mentality is pretending to be. And I think it's a fallacy, and us just calling it out is the first step. And really, if you look at every single human being, we're all unique. Every single human being is different than the rest. No two humans are the same. Even twins, they have different experiences and different even nuances to them. To where you can see that they're all important little pieces of the greater puzzle. And when we use those different pieces and put them together, it makes a more beautiful picture than just one piece by itself.
Yeah, that diversity of experience and everything else in life is certainly the flavor. Yeah, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about mindset and discipline. And I know I wanted to ask in particular on mindset. So I mentioned my son, and we have this amazing opportunity as we're both developing, and I'm working on things that I can share with him, which is super cool. And then we talked a little bit offline about Spartan race, just the concept of something you do where obstacles are designed to set you back or defeat you is an amazing metaphor for life, because you can go
Mm,
out there and learn what defeat looks like on a very short time frame. It's sort
mm,
of like life's hero journey, where everybody has, the baggage or the trauma, the thing that challenged them, and they've got to come out the other side of it and figure out what their superpower is. We can, jam that into one race and learn from it and do that over and over and over again. But the thing that I've taken away from an opportunity that's built into the design of one activity, one sport, it doesn't really show up in a lot of sports explicitly. So I mentioned club soccer with my son. I'm really interested in a way, and I'm fascinated by the fact that there's not already a construct in the vast majority of youth sports to help develop the emotional control, the mindset, the resilience, the discipline
mhm,
in those children. So, the closest maybe I've seen would be something like wrestling, where,
mhm,
it is a very tough sport physically and emotionally. I'm fascinated to hear what it's like in golf, because I thought back, talked to somebody this morning about growing up playing tennis.
mhm.
Nobody ever talked to me about what was going on in my head when I, stood up to serve, whether it's 40 love or I'm down 3 points.
Yeah.
But golf is a very inner mental game. Does that start early in youth golf, that type of coaching for mindset?
Yeah, it's not as present, and it's becoming more present as more and more awareness is definitely found in that space. I think you make a great point because in most sports it's not as highlighted. So I think golf and tennis and wrestling, like you said, at being individual sports, it's your mind is a big component of success or failure. In a sport like soccer, it's not even thought about hardly, right? It's like the team chemistry, the play, the coordination, all of those things, like the fitness. I mean, there's so many more things that take up headspace. But if you think about the individual development of each player on that team to elevate the whole team's performance, it makes perfect sense. So with golf, it's really interesting. I had some great coaches along the way. My high school coach, it kind of shows some of the progression. So as a junior, you're just trying to learn the game and get enough repetitions up to where you can repeat things, and you're getting more distance as you get bigger, and you're learning your body differently as you go along that. So it's a lot of just familiarity. When you get into high school, you really start seeing a broader pool of players usually as you play more around. And our coach did a great job of giving us just enough beyond the pay grade, meaning Charlie Pierce, a great guy. He gave us, before every tournament, he would give us a page of paper with, on each hole, he would give a couple sentences on what the hole was and some small strategy of what would be best. And just that little bit was honestly an amazing addition for a high school coach, because a lot of times they're just showing up and being, supervisors, but he was going the extra step to say, hey, there's some strategy involved in this game. And so hitting a different club off the tee here is actually more beneficial than just ripping driver. And here's why. And so you start understanding, oh, there's some strategy behind what I do. And there needs to be more reason behind the way I play. And then also he would talk to us after rounds and talk about shots and start breaking down a little bit of the play-by-play on the van rides and whatnot. So he definitely added the next element. And then going into college is just, you start diving deeper and deeper into the complexities. And so my college coach was very big. He played professionally some too. And so he was very big on understanding and processing what happened during the round, the decisions we were making and the results and what we can learn from that so we don't repeat mistakes. And you know, what was interesting for me personally is through that kind of deep dive, and I started doing a lot more reflection and journaling, and I really synthesized, there's three main areas of mistakes that I made. The first was mistakes from lack of confidence. And that's probably the most common. It's the hardest one to overcome, right? It's hard to muster up confidence if you hit a horrible shot and you have to hit a very similar shot next, right? Um, the second was mistakes from lack of preparation. And that's one of the easiest ones to shore up because you should be fully prepared to hit every shot at a certain level. You just need to be. And the third was mistakes from bad decision making. So you just made a wrong decision. You said, I need to hit this shot when really you need to hit this other type of shot. And so once I started having this framework, I could start plugging in where the mistakes were being made, see the correlations, and start really attacking the root of it. And as I found, like I just said, that the hardest ones are the lack of confidence, and that's mental discipline and mental strength. And you know, I had this story from when I was playing professionally on a mini tour event in the Midwest. It was the Adams Pro Tour, and it was in Kansas. My parents were out there, and I was middle of the fairway on a par 5, number 10, out at Colbert Hills. And I had about a 6-iron, I think, in my hands, going for the green. And it was going to, it was going to put me in place for maybe an eagle if I had a good shot. I ended up cold shanking it. And that, that will happen occasionally for even the best players in the world. And it was kind of one of those weird things, but it just immediately strikes this fear response within you of, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. I can't believe I just did that. What a horrible shot. And then the self-defeating narrative, you suck. You're not a good golfer. You shouldn't be out here. All these like negative talk. And then the beautiful thing about it is with that shot, I had to drop another ball and hit the same shot right then, right? Because it's out of bounds. And so literally hitting a shot that you just shanked, and you have to completely put that out of your mind and say, no, I'm going to remember the good shots, the shots that I normally hit with this club. And I'm going to have to simulate that right now. That's one of the hardest things to do. It's brutal. But that's a lot of what goes into the mental side, especially of an individual sport like golf or tennis or wrestling. But it's involved in every sport or every race or every part of life once we start becoming aware of it, like you said.
Yeah, it really is. Having played golf but never done it with the pressure of doing it competitively or professionally, it's amazingly hard. Or even in a team sport like baseball, you'll see a pitcher hang a pitch and it gets slapped for a home run, and they've got to stand up there and pitch again right away to the next batter and kind of fix it and learn from it and do it over. It does show up in life. And I think about it like a sport like soccer. You're probably never going to have the same play twice, but you're going to have things that go against you, calls that go against you. You got fouled or it was a no call, or if you follow soccer at all, there's Zidane who headbutted the Italian guy.
I remember that.
Right when he lost self-control, he lost control of himself, his emotions, and that effectively kind of cost him the game. So like when you said lack of confidence and bad decisions in both of those, I thought back a lot to emotional control. What am I going to focus on and how am I going to control my emotions? Because take it back to soccer again, how am I going to play the rest of the game after the referee made a call or a no call that I didn't like? Am I going to give up, or I failed that obstacle, or I threw that pitch, or the meeting or the sales pitch didn't go the way I wanted at work, or the conversation with my significant other? What do I do then? Do I give up, or do I have the control and the space to pause for a second, not say or do something that's just going to make it worse, and figure out what's next?
Yeah, beautifully said. That pause, that space is, I think, the most important element. If we don't have some space to be able to recognize and change or use those to our advantage, then it's often we're going to be reactive instead of proactive, right? Now in sports, right, it is like soccer; it's more reactive in that interesting comparison of soccer and golf is that one of the things that drove me nuts in golf, and that I think any golfer can relate to, is that when you make a mistake or you hit a bad shot or something doesn't go your way, we have an anger response, right? We get upset. And in golf versus something like football, if you miss a play or something, you just get upset and use it as fuel to go hit harder. You go stronger, faster, and you go with rage, right? It fuels you. It's good. In golf, you have to say the complete opposite of like, I have to get rid of this as soon as possible because my response is more calm, collected, controlled. And I wanted an outlet to go punch a bag or something, like you want that because there's something beneficial about that. In golf, you have to control and use that in a different way, almost suppress it in sometimes. So that was a really challenging thing about golf. But I think what you're talking about with obstacles and being proactive in that and viewing them as a good thing is a really helpful mechanism that we can develop in everyday life. But it's something that doesn't happen by chance. It takes practice, it takes effort and intention, which is why it's a discipline. But with that discipline, it unlocks so much, because then if you're playing soccer and you get a bad call, well, guess what? You can use that then as fuel of like saying, you know what, that didn't go my way and I can't control that. So I'm going to let it go, but I'm going to use it as fuel. And the best athletes, they use those emotions to their advantage versus their disadvantage. I love Stephen Kotler's book, The Rise of Superman, talking about flow and using the illustration of extreme athletes, because the extreme athletes, they have life or death at the end of their results, so they don't have time to waste on like getting upset and not using that or being fearful and letting that hurt their performance. They have to use that fear to elevate their performance so they live. And we can do that in all arenas, including business as well.
I heard it just reminded me for some reason of a story I heard, really about use of humor, I guess it would be, to sort of lighten the moment, to maybe help control emotions and separate a little bit. So I'll tie a couple pieces together here. And it's interesting, maybe as a flip side of your journey of being a competitive golfer and then now working with people on things like discipline and mindset. So a friend and coach of mine, actually, the guy that runs the SEAL Fit organization, Rich Thompson, he was growing up, college age, aiming to be a professional golfer. And he was looking at so he's, I don't know what Rich is, probably early mid 40s, and he's looking at Tiger, going, wait a minute, Tiger Woods has a father who's an ex special forces soldier helping him with mental toughness around his golf game. Like, how am I ever going to train that same way? And he's at college and he's walking by and sees a magazine about the Navy SEALs. Like, these guys are reportedly the most mentally and physically tough people in the world. So he goes like, "Hoo-yah, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL to teach me how to be a good professional golfer." So like, it's one of those amazing guys that just goes like, "I'm going to do something," and then he does it. Talking about action, right? So that's what he did. He went and spent a few years, became a Navy SEAL, trained that way, came back out and gave himself a time frame to play competitive golf, and ended up at the end of that, evaluated, well, I'm not where I want to be professionally, so switching gears and family and all that kind of stuff. But he was telling me a story about the he talking about skydiving, right? Jumping out of planes and helicopters. And he was talking about the first time he jumped out of a helicopter with a parachute, and it was into the water. And he was completely scared of parachuting into the water. He's like, I am 100% convinced that the parachute's going to come down around me, wrap me up, and I'm going to drown. 100%.
Wow.
But here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. And he's like, I'm all, thinking about that. And then right in front of me, my teammate's going out the door first. And he's like, booking for the door, and hits his head on the doorway and just starts tumbling right out of the helicopter. And Rich is like, awesome. Like my best friend is dying in front of me right before I die. Right. But he's kind of like, what else are you gonna do? But laugh about it and like keep on going and put those other emotions aside.
I think yeah, wow, what a powerful story. It's humor is such a great tool in that, and it connects too to this other idea that I've used a lot in sharing of experiences. Have you read the book Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galway?
No, but I remember that book growing up. I think my
Yeah,
parents had it on the shelf.
it's a great depiction of the mental side of any sport. It's focusing specifically on tennis, but man, it's such a powerful and helpful book and illustration. Kind of talking about our inner dialogue within our mind of these two selves. One is like the body, and one is like the mind, and how they communicate to each other is what dictates a lot of the performance. And ultimately, he's advocating for a healthy or a beneficial communication that builds each other up versus tears each other down, which we all experience in those environments, right? And it's what I like to equate it to, especially in golf. Is this difference of practice and performance, and I think that the practice mentality, the practice mindset, is the mindset in training that we use that's harder than we should be on ourselves, meaning it's holding ourselves to a higher level than we expect we're capable of, pushing ourselves beyond what we may think we'd be able to do, right? It's going for that extra rep, even though you probably won't be able to pull it up, but that's where the growth comes from. But when you switch over to performance, I got in trouble in golf because I was keeping that practice mindset in performance. And that actually hurt my performance. Whereas in performance, you want to have this mindset to where you show yourself more grace and kindness than you usually would. Meaning that ref makes a bad call, you laugh it off because you're showing yourself more grace. You're being kinder to yourself. You're saying, you know what? Not a big deal. It's okay. I'm laughing it off because that way, in golf, especially when you hit a bad shot, our natural instinct is to beat ourselves up, but that doesn't do any good. That doesn't help us. What helps us is saying, you know what, now's an opportunity to hit an even better shot, to have fun with getting out of the trees and be more creative and see more of the course. You can reframe a lot of these things. And if we have that difference between practice and performance, I think it really helps us make that shift a lot better.
How do you? I mean, I I know we're talking back towards discipline here, and I guess what I'm thinking about, and I mean to ask, is how do you? So let's talk about training discipline in golf, and then translate that to life and kind of what you do now. But as you were just describing, practicing up a level, but performing maybe within a zone of confidence. I was thinking about Bubba Watson coming out of the woods, drawing the ball onto the green
Yeah.
at the Masters. As an amateur golfer, then you get stuck in that spot and you go like, "Oh, I'm going to pull one of those shots off right now." And it's like, no way.
Yeah.
There's not even a fraction of a chance that's going to happen. So how do we have the discipline to stay within our kind of within our lane?
Yeah, you're speaking to the difference of improbable versus impossible.
Right. Right.
And knowing that again goes back to self-awareness, right? We have to I think if we're honest with ourselves, we know what's impossible. So for me to um I don't know, go bench press 400 pounds right now is impossible. I know that, right? But it's improbable if I go put up 225 right now for 5 reps. That's pretty improbable, and I don't think I can probably do it. But there's a slim chance. So I think that's just the awareness of like, okay, cool, like this is where I'm at, and usually I think that the healthy limit is what we're uncomfortable with, right? What kind of makes us a little bit queasy inside, what we feel a little bit like dishonest about saying that we're gonna try and do, like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, but I'm like inside, I'm like, I don't know if I can even do that, but so I think that feeling we all kind of know and relate with, and I think that's a great starting point for starting to get a gauge of where that improbable threshold that we can push for is. Um, but it always is going to entail discomfort. I think that's a given. It has to be uncomfortable.
As a signal.
Yeah.
Got it. And so what else about discipline? What are other ways to train discipline or bring discipline into our lives?
Yeah. Discipline, I think the first thing with that is just reframing it. So if we think about discipline, I think we have an aversion to it as adults usually, because if you think about the idea of discipline, when we first are aware of it or become known of it, it's as a child. And what that means is consequence and trouble. So you're getting disciplined is like, oh, I hate this, you know? So I think we subconsciously intuit that as adults of like, I don't like discipline. Like it's not fun, or it's not what I want to do. And some of those things are true, but the reality is that, like Jocko, says, discipline equals freedom, and it really does. And that idea that a painting isn't a painting without a canvas for it to go onto, but when you have that canvas, you have the full freedom of expression within that. And so, by having structure to our lives, that discipline allows us to have the full expression of what we want to do or who we are come out within that structure in the most beautiful ways. And so that dance between discipline and freedom, and how discipline comes first, is really important for us to understand and instill it and do the work needed to get there. And I think the easiest definition of discipline is effort plus intention. A reason why behind what that effort is and where we're going with it. And the idea that in life our default is to take the path of least resistance. So if we don't make a choice, we're taking the path of least resistance, we're going downstream. And so in order to go upstream, you have to intentionally choose and make effort to do that. And so that's the premise of it. And then developing it, there's a lot of tools that we can use. Everyone's going to have individual forms of that, but to be honest, my absolute favorite, especially because of its availability and because of its effectiveness, is cold showers, right? Cold showers are the number one way, in my opinion, practically applicably right now in your life. Everybody's taking a shower probably about once a day. And cold showers have zero negative side effects. So because of that, you get to do something every single day that you don't want to do. No one really wants to do that until you've learned to enjoy that. And that you have an opportunity to do daily. And that's only going to be positive benefits from. It's unlike most things in a training environment. And so when I was playing golf professionally, I was really frustrated by my lack of mental discipline. That was the number one thing that held me back from performance. My talent and skill was just as good as any other golfer out there, to be honest. But and it's humbling to say this, my mindset, my confidence, my belief was the limiting factor. And so to improve in that, I'm committing to taking cold showers, and I've been doing it ever since, to be honest. Now I do enjoy it and love it. And it does bring me life. But this idea, even it connects to a broader, is that life is not a hot shower. It just isn't, right? If we're honest with ourselves, life is not a hot shower. It's not some warm, cozy, comfortable thing. It's way harder than it is easier. And so this is just a really easy practice that creates more discipline and connects us to the reality that life is much more like a cold shower than a hot one.
Love cold showers. And yeah, life's like expecting a hot shower and getting a cold shower every once in a while instead.
Oh, that's good. That's even worse. Yeah.
It's the surprise cold shower. So, okay, within discipline, we've got intention. And so maybe we can go from intention to hope looking forward. But let me take a quick backtrack to one of the places we started, and we were talking about past, present, and future. So when you reflect on your professional golf career, and you say that your limiting beliefs were probably ultimately the limit to your endeavor, to your career, does that come from your past? Like, have you unpacked where that developed?
Yeah, it's a long story. I'll try to give you the short one. But so I grew up. As a Christian, and I still am a Christian. And faith was a big part of my life. And ultimately, for about 7 years of my life, I lived a life of with a lack of integrity. So I lived a life that said one thing and did another thing. And so I claimed to follow the way of Jesus, and yet I was living very differently, and had this hypocritical nature to me. And it came out in college with a series of events, and it all kind of came out to everyone that I loved and knew, and the deceit in that, and the lack of integrity in that. And it taught me just a really important lesson that integrity matters most. What you do, who you say you are, and that stacking up with each other is vital for anything you say to matter, and especially for anything you do to matter. And so through that, golf was happening alongside this. And so early on, a lot of my confidence in myself was not childish, but younger, right? It's more the ignorant confidence that I got into golf because it was an individual sport and I loved competing. I was such a competitor. I hated losing. I was like, this is somewhere where I can control everything and make sure I win, you know? As a kid, you're like, that makes sense, but you're also foolish and ignorant and naive. And then you get older and you're like, oh, I have to take responsibility for all the failures just as much. And there's way more of those than the successes. So you're like, oh, great. But, coming alongside that in golf, when I started rebuilding kind of my life around, I want to live with integrity and be the person that I say I am, I kind of took about 5 steps back mentally in golf, because it was kind of it was a pillar in my life, and especially in the college years where you're going through a lot of change and development of who you are and discovering that. It really set me back mentally. And I was trying to play catch up from that point. And I decided to turn professional the next year. And it just took me a little bit longer to get my footing, partly because of where I was at spiritually and within my life and my identity as a person. And then with that, I made a lot of mistakes that most people do, I guess, in the sense that we look to others for their recipe for success before understanding that needs to look to ourselves and that part of self-awareness. And so the first year or so, I was so busy trying to figure out what everyone else was doing and their blueprint for success that I wasn't taking the time to lean into how I was wired as a golfer and a player. And so that was a big learning curve. And then honestly, the second half of my career, I had a muscle strain. It was a muscle strain in my left rhomboid in my back. And that repeated 5 times over a year and a half. And that was really obviously a huge obstacle to being able to compete and be successful as a golfer. And that was one of the big things that God used to kind of redirect my path. But all that being said, when I started to gain some footing mentally is when the injury came about. And that kind of derailed a lot of my progress and then ended up leading me to pivoting. But it was an interesting journey, and understanding where those came from was really helpful in moving forward. Like you said, I think that's really important to take the time to process those things.
Thank you for having the honesty and the courage to share that. I appreciate you being willing to backtrack on that. It does sound like life and golf threw you one of life's cold showers with the with the physical, and it caused you to pivot, right? And you're doing some amazing stuff. Where was I going to go with that? Oh, so let me say this in a way that's probably just pretty tactless, but and maybe offensive, but it's not meant to be. No, it's kind of on the religion thing, and I grew up Catholic. I'm not super religious. Got a lot of friends who are of different faiths, and I respect it, and I see what a positive thing it is for so many people. I made a comment to a guy that I mentioned to you off air, Jeff DePatsy, who's a former Canadian Special Forces sniper, right? Like, talk about do hard stuff.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Jeff on air. He was on air, and I sort of said / asked. I go, when I started this podcast journey of just meeting amazing people and learning from them and hearing their stories and wanting to share it and try to apply it, I've meandered in types of guests and topics because all these, mindset and all these things transcend different domains and focuses and disciplines in life. So I'm totally open to whatever your area of focus is. If you have a passion for expertise, a passion for getting better, for growth, for mastery and pursuit of those things, let's talk about it, right? But I made this comment to Jeff. I go, like, somehow, if I look back at my guest history, I've talked to a bunch of Navy SEALs or Special Forces soldiers, and I've talked to a bunch of religious zealots, and I have no idea how that happened. I don't know how that happened. And he goes, I'll tell you how it happened, Michael. These are 2 organizations, religious organizations and faith systems and high performing military systems that understand that life is hard and that doing hard things is the path to growth and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Okay. That totally makes sense.
That's true. Yeah. That's really well said. I like that.
Yeah. So, all right. So moving forward, thanks for sharing some of your past. Let's talk about hope. I mean, this is a year that's been tough for a lot of people. Where does intention, you said effort plus intention is the component to discipline. Where does intention come in? How does living intentionally offer hope? And what else would you offer around a hopeful look at the rest of this year and beyond?
Yeah, wow, big question. We could talk forever about this, and I by no means have the answer there. I'm just sharing a perspective. When it comes to intention, I think intention is really helpful because then we can start saying, what's the goal, right? And today, in the world we live in, we are in a place that's becoming more and more divided, and we start thinking that what's important is uniformity instead of unity. And I think this idea that unity is only possible through difference, you can't have something like unity if there isn't difference that's present. And so having different views and perspectives is actually what leads to unity, and is actually a good thing. And uniformity is a really bad thing. We don't want everyone to be like us. I thought that way as a kid. I did. I honestly, as a little uh, grade schooler, I wanted people to be like me, and it was very childish. But we still can have that thought as adults, and we often do if we aren't intentional or conscious of it. And so, the hope that I think we all can have right now is that we can play an individual role in bringing about positive change that we wish to see in the world. And we do that through relationships. We don't do that through social media debates. We do that through person to person conversations and ultimately seeking to understand the other. I love this quote. I'm going to try and find it real quick because it's better read than said. But Morgan Housel, just see here. Yep. Okay. Morgan Housel, he said, wrong one. Talking about personal experience. I'll just paraphrase him. Basically said, your personal experiences shape about 80% of your view of the world, and yet it makes up about 0.00000001% of all that's happened in the world. We are all impacted by personal experience. And so the fact that your life experience is vastly different than my life experience, which is vastly different than everyone else listening, helps understand that, hey, we're going to see things differently. And that's a good thing. And so if the goal is unity, and that's only possible through difference, and every single person is going to have a different perspective, then we're in a great place. And we can be a part of moving the needle in a positive way by understanding that what we see on social media, on news outlets, on these polarizing places that we're often consuming is one, it's 10th hand information most of the time, right? Whereas this is firsthand, you and I talking, even though it's on a screen, we're talking firsthand. And that's only going to be worth what 10th hand information is, right? We have to take it as that and not take it as gospel. And then understand that everyone is generally wanting the same thing. They want good things for each other generally. There's bad actors always in every space. But if we can unite around, hey, we both want good, and we may be going about it different ways, but help me understand. I'd love to learn more about your perspective, what your experiences have shown, and so I can learn from you, And then also the final thing I'll say is asking for permission to be wrong. You know, hey, can you give me the permission? Just I may be wrong on this. All right, I'll just admit it. I may be wrong, but as I see it now, this is what I think, or this is how I see it. And that idea, man. My other favorite quote is from Muhammad Ali. He says, "The man who views his life at the age of 50, the same that he did at the age of 20, wasted 30 years of his life." And that's it. I hope my views are quite different in about 20 years. I hope they are, because that means I'm growing, I'm changing, and I'm learning through life. And so asking for permission to be wrong is, I think, a useful tool.
I really love that permission to be wrong, which really, so you turn that around, it's the recognition that there is no singular right. Everybody has perspective. And as you said, we got, whatever it is, 7 billion living people at one time right now on this planet that are all unique, all uniquely talented with different experiences, different perspectives. And everybody's right in their own way about their own thing. And that whole thing of we're 80% shaped by our past experience. I mean, what is the past? It's something just living in our memory right now. And I think there's a ton of science behind our memories being extremely flawed and emotional and subjective.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. And I think what you just brought up, the last thing I'll say on that is the other quote that I found recently delineates this difference, or defines this difference between the desire to be right and the desire to have been right. And they say, these two authors say, the desire to be right is the thirst for truth. And on all counts, both practical and theoretical, there's nothing but good to be said for it. The desire to have been right, on the other hand, is the pride that goeth before a fall, and it stands in the way of our seeing we were wrong, and thus blocks the progress of our knowledge. And I think that's a good description between the two, to know that we all we all think we're right, and we all want to pursue truth. But if we care more about having been right, we get into debates versus conversations, and those don't usually end up well.
Yeah, not at all. That reminds me of a quote I read ages ago, and I don't know who wrote this, but yeah, people can mull on this one. It's along the lines of there are no differences save for the differences between difference and no difference. The degrees of difference between difference and no difference, something like
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah, that's
So
good.
again, it's kind of all perspective. Well, Thane, let's kind of wrap up here in the next few minutes around what you're doing now and next. So the new book is out. It's available for email subscribers through your website. Is that at thanemarcus.com?
Correct. ThaneMarcus.com/hope is where you can find the book directly.
Amazing. Okay. And what else is going on? We've got the podcast, Up and Comers for Intentional Living. Tell me about that.
It's been a lot of fun, man. 4 years, passion project that my buddy and I from college started, and really just about the process of becoming, the process of learning throughout life. And we do long form interviews similar to yours, and it's just been a blast. I've learned so much from it, man. It's such a fun thing. So we're, I think, 166 or 7 episodes now. So it's just, I never, expected that. But that's been a blast. So people can find that at theupandcomershow.com, and we'd love for them to tune in.
Yeah, that's amazing. I saw how many episodes you got out there. I didn't realize that's how long you'd been in the game. It's such an amazing way to connect and network. You mentioned social media. It's not my favorite thing, and it's not a very deep connection you can form or develop. And it's amazing, this opportunity to get to talk to somebody by screen, by phone, even doing live interviews. It just opens so many
Mm.
doors. And I could say 100% of every interview, discussion, conversation I've had has surprised me and enriched me in some way.
I couldn't agree more. It's such a gift, and it makes us better listeners, makes us better question askers, and better thinkers. We're really broadening our line of thought, and even our experience by hearing from so many people's stories. So it's such a gift.
It's also a soup. I don't know about you, but an amazing way to package a lot of stuff we just talked about. Getting way outside your comfort zone, being terrible at something, but hopefully putting the reps in and getting a little bit better by a little bit better. All that kind of stuff. Where we're talking about growth,
Yeah.
leaning into things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's the last thing I would share on what I'm up to right now is I have 2 online courses that just are dropping in November. I'm not sure when this is coming out, but it's that's been, like a year-long process in making those, but I'm really stoked about it because like we've been talking about today, and taking ownership and never settling, and these ideas of growing in self-awareness and developing discipline. The whole point behind these 2 courses is to do that. It's an 8-week course. Both of them are 8-week courses, and they are just building some structure and accountability for people to walk forward in either self-awareness or discipline. So I'm really excited to have those live because, when you work on something for a long time, it just kind of kills you until it's out there in the world. So that's probably what I'm most excited about right now.
Well, congratulations in advance on that one. I'll look forward to that. Is that also going to be through your website at thanemarcus.com?
Yeah, there'll be a courses tab up top, and you can click on it there. And if people listening want to do it, I love giving people that find me on a podcast a discount. So there's a promo code where you can just type in podcast, and that'll get you $50 off.
Awesome. Thank you. That's super generous. We'll figure out coordination of airing and when those drop and get people over there. And just briefly, your social media accounts, are they also Thane Marcus?
Yep, at Thane Marcus and then at Up and Comer Show are the 2.
Awesome. And I want to say there was something else. You got your coaching. What does speaking look like right now for you in a COVID world?
It's been interesting. It's kind of virtual. Obviously most things are virtual now, and I've still got a younger speaking career. I'm still kind of getting my foot in the door, but I was able to give a virtual keynote this past month, which was fun, and I've got another one coming up in about a month. But it's definitely a different feel, and definitely a different experience. But I'm grateful for that and excited for more opportunities in the future and continuing to build that funnel. And I just love sharing words and trying to craft something that can impact people in a way that creates action in their lives. So it's a really fun outlet for sure.
Nice. Well, wrapping up, I guess, on the point of action. I love taking action. So, of all the stuff we talked about today, and we covered a lot, and again, I thank you for that. I mean, what's one way, one thing, one simple action someone could take right now, today, whether it's the cold shower, whether it's journaling. If you picked your favorite thing to recommend to somebody, what's something to do right now today?
I want to say I was gonna say the cold shower, so that
Okay.
could be my
All
answer.
right.
But the thing that I want to say actually is, um, sit down today with a pen and paper and ask yourself this question: Who have I been created, equipped, and called to be? Sit with that question for as long as you need. And that's really the question that I sat with for several months as I was coming out of golf and deciding on whether it was going to be golf or something else. And I think it's a really powerful question because it's holistic, and that created is your natural gifts and talents from birth. Equipped is that life experience you've had up to this point that have shaped you and given you unique value that you can bring to others. And finally, called is that passion, that drive, that fire within you that will not die. And when you combine those three things, that's a powerful cocktail for the impact that I think you're called to bring into the world. So
Yeah, that's a super powerful combination and an amazing way to wrap it up. In addition to cold showers. So.
cold showers too. Yeah. If you want to be in high achiever, overachiever, you're going to do both those.
you're gonna sit with that question in the cold shower and then go
Oh,
journal about
wow.
it.
There we go. That's it.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks again, Thane. ThaneMarcus.com. Thane Marcus Ringler. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Michael. It's been a blast.
Totally. Boom. Great one with Thane Marcus Ringler. You got to go check him out, his book and his training courses and his website, his podcast, and his social media. I just love the takeaway that he gave us, the assignment at the end. Sit down with a pen and paper and ask yourself, who have I been created, equipped, and called to be? There's a bunch to sit with there. So, as Thane also mentioned, creating space. So, find some time, quiet, silence, breathe, create space, and ponder that. Journal, see what insights you come up with. And if you did, I joked, but if you fast forwarded to the end to get that, great, and take it on. But go back and listen as well. Chunk this one up if you have to. Great stuff throughout the episode. Actionable stuff all over the place from Thane Marcus Ringler. Again, links and show notes will be at manofmastery.com/067 for episode 67 with Thane Marcus. And one more time, I'm going to ask, please, the ratings and reviews on iTunes are amazing. They help with search engines, and I love to read them off when I see them and pay a little tribute to the effort you guys put in. But the most direct way that you can take action and have an effect is share the episode, or share another one that happens to be your favorite, or share the whole show with at least one other person. Make a difference. All right, that's it for this week. Look, it's going to be a tough week in a lot of ways for a lot of people with a lot of noise, but keep it focused. Again, back to what you can control: intention, attention, emotions, physiology. Take ownership of your thoughts, your behaviors, and your actions. Let's get out there and get after it. Have an amazing week.